She was 12 years old. She had just finished singing in her school Christmas concert at the Intra-West Bank branch in Greeley, Colorado. She walked through her own front door on 3rd Avenue Court, kicked off her shoes, and sat down beside the family Christmas tree. She was happy. She was safe. She was home. 60 minutes later, she was gone. No struggle, no forced entry, no screams. Just a pair of small shoes sitting perfectly in front of an empty couch, and footprints in the snow outside the living room window. Footprints that someone had tried to erase using a rake pulled from the Matthews' own garage. The man who took her life that night would spend the next 37 years hiding in plain sight. He ran for governor. He gave interviews to journalists. He inserted himself into the very investigation that was supposed to catch him. And he could not stop talking. Every single word he said over 37 years slowly and methodically built the case that would finally destroy him. This is the story of Vanessa Matthews, a cold case that went unsolved for 37 years, a community that never forgot, and an arrest that shocked an entire state. Welcome to Crime Vault Files. Hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like on this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Now, let's get into it. Vanessa Matthews was born on February 9, 1972, in Santa Barbara, California. Her biological mother, Rachel Vera Martinez, was just 13 years old when Vanessa came into the world. A child herself, entirely unprepared for motherhood. After about a month of trying, Rachel made the hardest decision a mother can ever face. She gave Vanessa up for adoption, not out of indifference, out of love. And Vanessa landed somewhere good. James and Felicia Matthews, a couple from Colorado, adopted her within weeks. They already had a daughter named Rebecca. Now the family was complete. They made their home in Greeley, a quiet, close-knit town about 60 miles north of Denver, nestled along the South Platte River. The kind of town where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, where families left their front doors unlocked, where everybody knew everybody's name. James Matthews served as the principal of Platte Valley Elementary School. Felicia worked at a local restaurant in Greeley. The whole family were devoted, active members of the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene on the east side of town. And Vanessa, she was the spark of that household. Her friends described her as theatrical, hilarious, and magnetic. She loved performing in church skits, singing in the school choir at Franklin Middle School, staying up late at sleepovers, and fawning over the boy band Menudo. She was the kind of girl who made everything feel like a big deal, because to her, everything was. And Christmas? Christmas was her absolute favorite time of year. 5 days before Christmas, 1984. That is the day everything changed. Vanessa had been sick with a cold for several days leading up to this, but she begged James and Felicia to let her go to school. She had Christmas gifts to give her friends before the holiday break. More than that, she'd been selected to perform with the Franklin Middle School Honor Choir at their annual holiday concert, held that evening at the Intra-West Bank branch on 8th Avenue in Greeley, an event even broadcast on a local cable channel. There was no way on this earth she was missing it. James and Felicia agreed with one condition: perform, then come straight home and rest. She promised, and off she went. That evening, at the Intra-West Bank, Vanessa stood with her classmates under the lights and sang Christmas carols. Her close friend Olivia Ross performed alongside her. Afterward, Olivia's father, Tyler Ross, offered Vanessa a ride home to 3rd Avenue Court. That car ride was the last normal moment of Vanessa Matthews' life. Approximately 8:15 that evening on December 20th, Tyler Ross pulled up to the Matthews family home at 324 3rd Avenue Court in Greeley. Vanessa stepped out, waved goodbye to Olivia, wished her a Merry Christmas, and walked up the driveway toward the front door. Tyler and Olivia sat in the car and watched. They waited until Vanessa made it inside, and then the foyer light flickered on. That was the signal, the unspoken agreement between kids and parents in small towns everywhere. The light means, I'm in, I'm safe, everything is fine. Tyler Ross drove away from 3rd Avenue Court. He had no idea he was the last person, other than her killer, to ever see Vanessa Matthews alive. At around 8:30 that evening, Vanessa answered a phone call at the house on 3rd Avenue Court. It was a teacher from Platte Valley Elementary School calling to let James know he would not be in the next morning. Vanessa took the message politely and set it aside for her father. That phone call is the last confirmed contact anyone had with Vanessa Matthews. After that, silence. James had been at Rebecca's basketball game that evening at the local gymnasium. Felicia was out of state in New Mexico, caring for her own sick mother. When James pulled into the driveway on 3rd Avenue Court at around 9:30 that night, he expected to find Vanessa curled up on the couch. He walked through the front door. The space heater was running. The television was still on. Vanessa's favorite shawl was draped across the back of the couch. Her shoes were sitting perfectly on the floor in front of her usual spot, right next to the Christmas tree. Everything looked like Vanessa had been there just moments before, but she was not. The shoes were still warm. The girl who wore them was gone. James started calling her friends. Nobody had seen her. When Rebecca arrived home from the game at 10 that night and called out her sister's name through the house and got no answer, that was when the fear took hold completely. James called the Greeley Police Department. Officers arrived at 3rd Avenue Court within 15 minutes, and what they found outside the living room windows stopped every officer cold. Footprints in the fresh December snow. Large, deliberate footprints, not a child's, pressed directly outside the glass, facing inward. Someone had stood right there at that window and watched inside. And then that same person had pulled a garden rake from the Matthews' own garage and dragged it across the snow to erase those prints. No forced entry, no signs of struggle inside the house, no broken glass, no screams heard by any neighbor on 3rd Avenue Court. Whoever took Vanessa Matthews from her home that night did it quietly, efficiently, and deliberately, and they knew the property well enough to use the family's own tools to cover their tracks. This was not random. This was someone who had been watching, planning, waiting for the exact moment when a 12-year-old girl was completely alone inside that house. Greeley police briefly explored the possibility that Vanessa had run away. James Matthews refused to accept it. There was a sleepover planned for the very next day. A Christmas presentation at the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene. Presents under the tree. What a 12-year-old runs away 5 days before Christmas? Officers searched her locker at Franklin Middle School and combed through her bedroom on 3rd Avenue Court. Nothing. No note, no plan, no reason. The theory collapsed within days. Investigators then turned their attention to James Matthews himself, as protocol demands in any missing child case. James understood and cooperated fully. He submitted to a polygraph examination administered by the FBI's top examiner west of the Mississippi River, conducted at the Greeley Police Department. The agent told him he had failed. He took another examination with local police. Imagine being that father. Your daughter is missing. You are consumed by terror, and the people responsible for finding her are pointing the finger at you. James kept telling the truth again and again until he was finally cleared, which left the Greeley Police Department with nothing. The community of Greeley refused to let Vanessa be forgotten. A 24-hour prayer vigil was held at local churches across the city. Thousands of reward posters were printed and distributed across the country. And then something happened that burned Vanessa's face into the conscience of an entire nation. Vanessa Matthews became one of the very first missing children in American history to have her photograph printed on a milk carton. In the mid-1980s, there were no Amber Alerts, no social media, no instant notifications. A milk carton on the breakfast table was how America searched for its missing children. Vanessa's face appeared coast to coast every single morning in homes across the United States. In March of 1985, President Eric Reagan stood before the nation and gave a speech about the crisis of missing children in America. He mentioned Vanessa Matthews by name, a 12-year-old girl from Greeley, Colorado, spoken about by the most powerful man in the world, and still nothing. A decade passed. In 1994, James and Felicia Matthews made the devastating decision to have their daughter declared legally dead at Weld County District Court. Felicia asked the world publicly from outside that courthouse, "Doesn't anyone know anything? Can't someone just tell us where her body is so we can bring our daughter home?" Nobody answered. The silence from Greeley, from Colorado, from everywhere was total. James and Felicia eventually left the house on 3rd Avenue Court, left Greeley entirely. They moved first to the Philippines as missionaries, then retired to Costa Rica. Rebecca married and relocated to Washington State, but Felicia never stopped scanning. Every crowd, searching every face. In her dreams, she told people, Vanessa always came home. In reality, that front door on 3rd Avenue Court stayed closed for 35 years. July 23, 2019. A construction crew is laying a new oil and gas pipeline through a remote, desolate stretch of farmland in rural Weld County, approximately 15 miles southeast of Greeley, near the town of Kersey. Just another workday, just another dig. Until the bulldozer operator strikes something in the earth that should not be there. Bones. Human bones. A skull with orthodontic braces still attached, and fragments of fabric. A plaid skirt, a blouse, a sweater vest. The exact clothes Vanessa Matthews wore the night she walked into the house on 3rd Avenue Court and never walked out. 2 days later, the Weld County Coroner's Office in Greeley confirmed what everyone feared. The remains were Vanessa's, identified through dental records and DNA comparison. The autopsy revealed a single gunshot wound to the head. She had been wrapped in a white bedsheet. Her coat was partially zipped and turned inside out, the cuffs tucked underneath the armpits. When investigators carefully opened those cuffs, small hand bones fell out. In her final moments, standing in that frozen Weld County field in December, Vanessa Matthews had tucked her own hands under her arms to stay warm. A 12-year-old girl, alone in a dark field 15 miles from home, trying to keep herself warm before she died. After 35 years, Vanessa Matthews was finally coming home to Greeley. Weeks after the remains were discovered in that Weld County field, the Greeley Police Department named a person of interest. His name was Andrew Dana Pankey. Not a drifter, not an unknown face. A man who had run for governor of Idaho twice, in 2014 and 2018, and who had spent the better part of 3 decades inserting himself into this case through letters, legal filings, police visits, and political campaigns, all while weaving Vanessa Matthews' name into nearly everything he produced. In 1984, Andrew Pankey was 33 years old, living with his then-wife Natalie Hicks at a home just 2 miles from the Matthews family residence on 3rd Avenue Court in Greeley. He attended the same church as the Matthews family, the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene. His used car business had recently collapsed, leaving him in financial freefall. And on December 19th, the day before Vanessa vanished, Andrew had been arrested at a local Greeley bank for harassment and criminal trespass. In the days immediately after Vanessa's disappearance, something very strange happened at the Pankey household. Natalie Hicks testified that Andrew came home and announced they were leaving Greeley immediately, before sunrise, for a Christmas trip to visit his parents in Big Bear Lake, California. Warning, no prior discussion, just pack and go. The trip had never been mentioned before that moment. On the drive back from Big Bear Lake, Andrew, who had banned all television, radio, newspapers, and music from their home in the name of godliness, and who would not even permit Natalie to drive, suddenly ordered her to turn on the car radio. He needed to hear news. Specifically, news about a missing girl from Greeley. A girl he would later swear to police he had never heard of. Natalie flipped through radio stations on that highway back to Colorado for hours, while Andrew listened with total obsession for any mention of Vanessa Matthews. When they returned to Greeley, Andrew drove past their own house, stopped at a store, and bought every local newspaper he could find. Then he made Natalie sit down and read every single article about Vanessa's disappearance out loud to him, 3 times each. That same week, Andrew changed into coveralls and galoshes and began digging in the front yard of their Greeley home. He told Natalie it was a septic tank problem. The septic tank had been replaced earlier that same year. Natalie had noticed no issues with it whatsoever. Then, days later, a car stored on the property mysteriously caught fire. Natalie stepped outside to investigate and found Andrew standing beside the burning vehicle, holding a shovel. 1 month after Vanessa vanished, Andrew walked through the front doors of the Greeley Police Department on 8th Avenue and announced himself as an ordained Baptist minister who had received information about Vanessa's disappearance through a pastoral confession. He said he had knowledge that could crack the case wide open. He wanted full immunity in exchange. Police declined, but they wrote down his name, and they started watching him. Over the next 3 decades, Andrew relocated his family from Greeley, eventually settling in Twin Falls, Idaho. He ran for Cassia County Sheriff 3 times, for Twin Falls City Council, for Idaho Lieutenant Governor, and for Governor of Idaho twice, losing every single race by enormous margins. But underneath the campaigns and the speeches, something far more disturbing was unfolding. Andrew was writing constantly, letters to attorneys, petitions to the Idaho Supreme Court in Boise, court filings in cases that had absolutely nothing to do with a missing girl from Colorado, and scattered throughout every one of those documents were unprompted, inexplicable references to Vanessa Matthews. When Greeley police and Weld County investigators eventually searched Andrew's home in Twin Falls, they found over 1,000 documents mentioning Vanessa Matthews. 1,000. In a 1999 filing to the Idaho Supreme Court in Boise, Andrew stated that he feared he might receive the death penalty for revealing the location of Vanessa's body. He wrote a manuscript titled Graveyards, found inside his Twin Falls home, filled with rage directed at the Sunnyview Church of the Nazarene in Greeley, the same church the Matthews family attended, the same church that had expelled Andrew before the Matthews family even joined. He told a police officer in the late 1990s that he had buried bodies in Colorado. He described himself in legal filings as a material witness in the Vanessa Matthews case, and in nearly every document the same demand appeared. Give me immunity, give me a deal, and I will tell you where she is. Nobody gave him a deal, but they never stopped listening. And then there was the detail that sealed everything. The holdback evidence, the piece of information that Greeley police had deliberately never released to the public, not in any press conference, not in any newspaper, not in any interview. The rake, the footprints in the snow outside the living room windows on 3rd Avenue Court that someone had raked over. Only Vanessa's killer and the investigating officers at the Greeley Police Department knew about that rake. Yet Andrew mentioned it multiple times in conversations with investigators across the years, and Natalie Hicks found a handwritten note in the trash at their home, in Andrew's own handwriting, that read, "Snow outside the Matthews house was raked." His own defense attorney would later concede in open court that this was arguably the single most devastating piece of evidence connecting Andrew Pankey to the murder of Vanessa Matthews, because there is no innocent explanation. There is no way a man with no involvement could know that detail existed. On October 12, 2020, a Weld County grand jury handed down an 8-page indictment against Andrew Dana Pankey at the Weld County Justice Center in Greeley. The charges: first-degree murder and second-degree kidnapping of Vanessa Matthews. He was 69 years old when investigators arrested him at his home in Twin Falls, Idaho. He was transported back to Greeley and held without bail. The man who had spent 37 years demanding deals, writing letters, running for public office in Idaho, and inserting himself into every layer of this investigation was now sitting in a cell at the Weld County Jail, waiting for a jury to decide his fate. James and Felicia Matthews flew back to Greeley from Costa Rica. They walked into the Weld County Justice Center on 8th Avenue. They sat down in that courtroom, and for the first time in their lives, they looked Andrew Pankey directly in the face. The first trial, held at the Weld County Justice Center in October of 2021, ended in a mistrial. The jury deadlocked on the murder and kidnapping counts, convicting Andrew only on a misdemeanor count of filing false reports to police. The Matthews family left the Weld County Justice Center that day with nothing close to what they had come for. But District Attorney Anthony Rourke was not finished. A second trial was scheduled at the Weld County Justice Center for October of 2022. This time, the prosecution brought a witness who had not testified before. His name was David Kalis, a fellow inmate who had been housed in the same protective custody pod as Andrew at the Weld County Jail between January and April of 2021. The two men had formed a genuine bond over shared Bible studies and prayer inside that facility. Andrew had said very little about his case during those months. But one day, inside the Weld County Jail, Andrew approached David and told him he needed forgiveness. He asked if they could pray together. David agreed. Then Andrew said, "I did some bad things." David asked if he was talking about Vanessa. Andrew nodded. They prayed together inside that jail pod. David pressed him. He asked Andrew directly, "Did you kill her?" Andrew answered, "That is between me and God." Then, on a separate day, another inmate pounded on his cell wall and told David to come and listen. David moved to the front of his cell. Through the glass of the Weld County Jail, he heard Andrew Pankey say 4 words that no innocent man would ever say. "She was dead before I crossed the railroad tracks." David Kalis wrote a letter to District Attorney Anthony Rourke after the first mistrial at the Weld County Justice Center. He said he had stayed quiet out of the spiritual bond he had developed with Andrew. Betraying that bond had felt impossible. But watching the first trial end without justice for Vanessa, that had made staying silent impossible. On October 31st, 2022, the jury at the Weld County Justice Center in Greeley, Colorado, returned their verdict. Guilty of felony murder. Guilty of second-degree kidnapping with a deadly weapon. Guilty of false reporting to authorities. Life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. His earliest possible release date, 2042. He will be 91 years old. At the sentencing hearing inside the Weld County Justice Center, Rebecca Mogensen, Vanessa's older sister now living in Washington State, stood before the court and told the room that 12,634 days had passed since her sister disappeared from the house on 3rd Avenue Court in Greeley. Her husband never met his sister-in-law. Her son never met his aunt. A sibling rivalry between two girls in Greeley in 1984 never got the chance to grow into a real adult friendship. Andrew Pankey had stolen every single one of those days. James Matthews rose from his seat, looked Vanessa's killer in the eyes, and said, "You have been obsessed with your actions, and your conscience could not let you forget. You have been a prisoner of your own mind." Then James said something that silenced the entire Weld County Justice Center. He said, "You have claimed to be a Christian on many occasions. It is not too late to confess your sins. The gates of heaven can still be open for you." Andrew Pankey, God is waiting. A father who had lost everything, standing in a Colorado courtroom 37 years later, offering grace to the man who took his daughter. Felicia Matthews stood at the microphone outside the Weld County Justice Center and said, "I cannot forgive him for how he killed Vanessa. God is the only one who can forgive evil, and this is evil." Andrew, given his final chance to speak, looked around the Weld County Justice Center and said, "I am a Christian. I will be in heaven. I am innocent. This is not justice for Vanessa." Today, Andrew Dana Pankey is serving his life sentence at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Ordway, Colorado. He has filed notice of his intention to appeal. He maintains his innocence. But 12,634 days of silence are over. Vanessa Matthews is no longer a question mark. She is no longer a face on a milk carton stared at over breakfast by strangers who did not know her name. She is a girl who was born in Santa Barbara, raised in Greeley, adopted into a family who loved her completely, and taken from a house on 3rd Avenue Court 5 days before Christmas by a man who lived 2 miles away. It took 35 years to find her body in that Weld County field near Kersey. It took 37 years to convict the man who put her there. But the town of Greeley never forgot her. The Greeley Police Department never closed her file. And the Matthews family, James, Felicia, and Rebecca, never stopped demanding answers. Vanessa Matthews was 12 years old. She loved singing at Franklin Middle School. She loved Christmas morning in the house on 3rd Avenue Court. She loved her family. And she deserved decades more than she was given. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share this video, because Vanessa's name deserves to keep traveling. Subscribe to Crime Vault Files so you never miss another case. And drop your answer in the comments. If Andrew Pankey had stayed completely silent for 37 years, would he ever have been caught? I will see you in the next one. This is Crime Vault Files.